the importation of whole classes of ships was progressively substituted by local assembly, and then complete local production, starting with the smallest ships, such as torpedo boat sound cruisers in the 1880s, to finish with whole battleships in the early 20th century. The last major purchase was in 1913 when the battlecruiser Kong was purchased from the Vickers shipyard. By 1918, there was no aspect of shipbuilding technology where Japanese capabilities fell significantly below world standards. 66. The period immediately after Tsushima also saw the IJN, under the influence of the navalist theoretician Satetsuta, adopt an explicit policy of building for a potential future conflict against the U.S. Navy. Set out for a battle fleet at least 70% as strong as that of the U.S. In 1907, the official policy of the Navy became an 8-8 fleet of 8 modern battleships and 8 battlecruisers. However, financial constraints prevented this ideal ever becoming a reality. 67. By 1920, the Imperial Japanese Navy was the world's third largest navy and a leader in naval development following its 1897 invention by Marconi. The Japanese Navy was the first navy to employ wireless telegraphy in combat, at the 1905 Battle of Tsushima. 68. In 1905, it began building the battleship Satsuma, at the time the largest warship in the world by displacement, and the first ship to be designed, ordered and laid down as an all-big gun battleship, about 1 year prior to the launching of HMS Dreadnought. However, due to a lack of material, she was completed with a mixed battery of rifles, launched on 15 November 1906, and completed on the 25th of March 1910. 69, 70. Between 1903, 69, and 1910, Japan began to build battleships domestically. The 1906 battleship Satsuma was built in Japan with about 80% material imported from Great Britain. With the following battleship class in 1909, 71, the Kawachi, being built with only 20% imported parts. World War I, 1914-1918. Warship on the sea with mountainous background. The seaplane carrier Wakemia conducted the world's first sea-launched air raids in September 1914. Japan entered World War I on the side of the Entente, against Germany and Austria-Hungary, as a consequence of the 1902 Anglo-Japanese alliance. In the siege of Tsingtao, the Imperial Japanese Navy helped seize the German colony at Jiaoju Bay. During the siege, beginning on the 5th of September 1914, Wakemia conducted the world's first successful sea-launched airstrikes. On 6 September 1914, in the very first air-sea battle in history, a Farman aircraft launched by Wakemia attacked the Austro-Hungarian cruiser Kaiserin Elizabeth and the German gunboat Jaguar off Qingdao. 72, from Jiaoju Bay. 4 Maurice Farman seaplanes bombarded German land targets like communication and command centers, and damaged a German mine layer in the Tsingtao Peninsula from September to the 6th of November 1914 when the Germans surrendered. 73. A battle group was also sent to the Central Pacific in August and September to pursue the German East Asiatic Squadron, which then moved into the Southern Atlantic, where it encountered British naval forces and was destroyed at the Falkland Islands. Japan also seized German possessions in northern Micronesia which remained Japanese colonies until the end of World War II, under the League of Nations South Seas Mandate. 74. Hard-pressed in Europe, where she had only a narrow margin of superiority against Germany, Britain had requested, but was denied, the loan of Japan's 4 newly built Kong-class battlecruisers, Kong, Haya, Haruna, and Kirishima, some of the first ships in the world to be equipped with 356 mm, 14-in, guns, and the most formidable battlecruisers in the world at the time. 75, following a further request by the British and the initiation of unrestricted submarine warfare by Germany in March 1917, the Japanese sent a special force to the Mediterranean. This force consisted of one air-protected cruiser, Akashi as flotilla leader, and 8 of the Navy's newest Kaba-class destroyers, Yun Kazanoki, Kied, Katsura, Kashiwa, Matsu, Sujai, and Seikeki, under Admiral Sat KZ, was based in Malta and efficiently protected Allied shipping between Marseille, Taranto, and ports in Egypt until the end of the war. 76. In June, Akashi was replaced by Izumo, and 4 more destroyers were added, Kashi Hinaki, Momo, and Yanagi. They were later joined by the cruiser Nishin. By the end of the war, the Japanese had escorted 788 Allied transports. One destroyer, Seikeki, was torpedoed on the 11th of June 1917 by a German submarine with the loss of 59 officers and men. A memorial at the Calcara Naval Cemetery in Malta was dedicated to the 72 Japanese sailors who died in action during the Mediterranean convoy patrols. 77. In 1917, Japan exported 12 Arabe-class destroyers to France. In 1918, ships such as Azuma were assigned to convoy escort in the Indian Ocean between Singapore and the Suez Canal as part of Japan's contribution to the war effort under the Anglo-Japanese alliance. After the conflict, the Japanese Navy received 7 German submarines as spoils of war, which were brought to Japan and analyzed, contributing greatly to the development of the Japanese submarine industry. 78. Interwar years, 1918-1937. The battleship Nagato in the early 1920s. By 1921, Japan's naval expenditure reached nearly 32% of the national government budget. In 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy possessed 10 battleships, 10 aircraft carriers, 38 cruisers, heavy and light, 112 destroyers, 65 submarines, and various auxiliary ships. Washington Treaty System. In the years following after the end of First World War, the naval construction programs of the 3 greatest naval powers, Britain, Japan, and the United States, had threatened to set off a new potentially dangerous and expensive naval arms race. 79. The subsequent Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 became one of history's most effective arms reduction programs. 80. Setting up a system of ratios between the 5 signatory powers. The United States and Britain were each allocated 525,000 tons of capital ships, Japan 315,000, and France and Italy to 175,000, ratios of 5:31.75. 81. Also agreed to was a 10-year moratorium on battleship construction. The replacement of battleships reaching 20 years of service was permitted. Maximum limits of 35,000 tons and 16-inch guns were also set. Carriers were restricted with the same 5:5:3 ratio, with Japan allotted 81,000 tons. 81. Many naval leaders in Japan's delegation were outraged by these limitations, as Japan would always be behind its chief rivals. However, in the end it was concluded that even these unfavorable limitations would be better than an unrestricted arms race with the industrially dominant United States. 82. The Washington system may have made Japan a junior partner with the US and Britain, but it also curtailed the rise of China and the Soviet Union, who both sought to challenge Japan in Asia. 83. The Washington Treaty did not restrict the building of ships other than battleships and carriers, resulting in a building race for heavy cruisers. These were limited to 10,000 tons and 8-inch guns. 84. The Japanese were also able to get some concessions, most notably the battleship Matsu, 85, which had been partly funded by donations from school children and would have been scrapped under the terms of the treaty. The treaty also dictated that the United States, Britain, and Japan could not expand their Western Pacific fortifications. Japan specifically could not militarize the Kuril Islands, the Bonin Islands, Amami Oshima, the Luchu Islands, Formosa and the Pescadores. 86. Development of naval aviation. Japan at times continued to solicit foreign expertise in areas in which the IJN was inexperienced, such as naval aviation. The Japanese Navy had closely monitored the progress of aviation of the three Allied naval powers during World War I and concluded that Britain had made the greatest advances in naval aviation. 87. The Sempil mission led by Captain William Forbes Sempil, a former officer in the Royal Air Force experienced in the design and testing of Royal Navy aircraft during the First World War. 88. Their mission consisted of 27 members, who were largely personnel with experience in naval aviation and included pilots and engineers from several British aircraft manufacturing firms. 88. The British technical mission left for Japan in September with the objective of helping the Imperial Japanese Navy develop and improve the proficiency of its naval air arm. 88. The mission arrived at Kasumagura Naval Air Station the following month, in November 1921, and stayed in Japan for 18 months. 89. The mission brought to Kasumagura well over 100 British aircraft comprising 20 different models, 5 of which were then currently in service with the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm. The Japanese were trained on several, such as the Gloucester Sparrowhawk, then a frontline fighter. The Japanese would go. 2 men standing over the interior of an airplane's cockpit. Captain Sempil showing a Sparrowhawk fighter to Admiral Gihachi, 1921, on to order 50 of these aircraft from Gloucester, and build 40. 90. These planes eventually provided the inspiration for the design of a number of Japanese naval aircraft. Technicians become familiar with the newest aerial weapons and equipment: torpedoes, bombs, machine guns, cameras, and communications gear. 88. Japanese naval aviators were trained in various techniques such as torpedo bombing, flight control and carrier landing and takeoffs. The mission also brought the plans of the most recent British aircraft carriers, such as HMS Argus and HMS Hermes, which influenced the final stages of the development of the carrier HSH. By the time its last members had returned to Britain, the Japanese had acquired a reasonable grasp of the latest aviation technology and taken the first steps toward having an effective naval air force. 91. Japanese naval aviation also, both in technology and in doctrine, continued to be dependent on the British model for most after 1920s. 92. Naval developments during the interwar years. Aircraft carrier on the sea with cloudy sky in the background. HSH, the world's first purpose-built aircraft carrier, completed in 1922. Between the wars, Japan took the lead in many areas of warship development. In 1921, it launched HSH, the first purpose-designed aircraft carrier in the world to be completed, and subsequently developed a fleet of aircraft carriers second to none. In keeping with its doctrine, the Imperial Japanese Navy was the first to mount 356 mm, 14-in, guns, in Kong, 4 10mm, 16.1-in, guns, in Nagato, and began the only battleships ever to mount 460 mm, 18.1-in, guns, in the Yamato class. 93. In 1928, she launched the innovative Fubuki-class destroyer, introducing enclosed dual 127mm, 5-in, turrets capable of anti-aircraft fire. The new destroyer design was soon emulated by other navies. The Fubuki's also featured the first torpedo tubes enclosed in splinter-proof turrets. 94. Japan developed the 610mm, 24-in, oxygen-fueled Type 93 torpedo, generally recognized as the best torpedo of World War II. 95. Doctrinal debates. The Imperial Japanese Navy was faced before and during World War II with considerable challenges, probably more so than any other navy in the world. 96. Japan, like Britain, was always